Hi, I want to go back to Bryce again today and try to discuss his concerns with hardness and edge bevels and rolling edges. And let me try to put it in context how I understand it. I am a collector of knives. I've shopped a lot of knives. That is just enough knowledge to make me dangerous. It makes me opinionated without necessarily knowing all the facts. So I apologize, but let me. This is what the purpose of me starting this Facebook group was: is to have these kind of conversations and bring forth other wicked edge sharpening, knife sharpening enthusiasts who want to discuss practical use of their wicked edge sharpeners. When we were talking yesterday about hardness and Bryce was concerned that aggressive grits could remove steel that was hardened, exposing fresh steel that doesn't have the hardening that the edge steel had. Um, and it's possible that steel knives are not hardened all the way through. My understanding is, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is most hardening processes that knife manufacturers use, knife makers, knife smiths use, is a heated process that's homogeneous. They put that whole knife into the heat. They bring it to a certain temperature and then they cool it or temper it or quench it, sometimes quickly, sometimes at different temperatures over time. That's the science of new metallurgy and these new high tech steels that we're coming out with. They're experimenting with the hardness and the tempering. When we're talking about HRC, that is hardness Rockwell scale C. That's the H, big R, little c, I believe is how it's written, is a description, a number scale that rates steel hardness. For us knife users, I mostly use chef knives. Our knives run in the range from a hardness of 56 all the way up to, I have some knives that are like claim to be 67 or 68 in hardness. That's probably the highest number I've seen. So the hardness scale only runs from about 56 to really about 65, and anything above that is really super hard. And I've not seen anything that was designated softer than 56. I guess you wouldn't want to brag about that. That all said, a knife that's a 56 or a 58 hardness is what I consider soft. It's on the soft end of the scale. That steel tends to bend under the weight of the edge, and the edge gets crinkled, and that's what they discuss as rolled. That's a characteristic of that hardness rated steel, that soft steel. Global happens to be a knife that's a 56 to 58 rated steel, and that's what Bryce discussed. And a rolling edge on that knife is a normal wear characteristic that we see if we inspect these edges. When it's clamped in our wicked edge and we use a USB microscope to inspect the edge, we can see what is described as, what I describe as a rolled edge. I'm going to go through my pictures and try to find some and try to post them. What I see and understand as a rolled edge may not be what someone else describes as a rolled edge. but the physical manifestation of how that edge compresses and rolls as compared to wears and breaks off, that steel, as it gets harder, it gets more brittle and it wears more and it breaks off more. And the edge that you see is more of a shabby edge. Sometimes it's just crushed and broken, and other times it just looks like it was ripped off. All these different edges that I've seen, when I clamp up a knife that I'm sharpening and I inspect the edge, I try to compare the edge with the knife's hardness and learn from that to get a physical picture, right, in my mind, recognize what that looks like. And I recognize now that softer steels have that roll, and the harder, more brittle steels, they have a different edge look to them when they wear. This is part of the characteristic of a knife. If you have a knife, I'm reading Bryce's post. If you have a knife like Global, which they claim is sharpened to 15 degrees, and it's an HRC of 56 to 58, that edge is going to roll. That's what those edges do. It's going to roll until you've used it enough, and then it's going to tear off. That's what it looks like. That's not a problem. That is something that you may be able to sharpen around, like Bryce said, maybe put a convex edge on it and it may stand up more. This all has to do with thickness and the support of the steel behind the edge. The narrower the edge is, the easier it is for that edge to compress down or roll on itself. As you get harder steels, that gets noticeably harder, that steel gets stronger, that steel handles the stress more. From 56 to 58 is like the beginning place for knives for softness. When you get 57, 58, you can see a difference in the hardness. When you get to 59, 60, that already, 60 is starting to be a hard steel, and it has that attributes of some roll and some tear or wear off. When you get harder, 61, 62, 63, that's already what I call a hard steel. And you get into a 63 or 64, now you're dealing with chip outs and break offs because that steel is more brittle, it is harder. These things are a smooth transition from that 56 to that like 65. It's a small scale of numbers on the scale of 1 to 100, putting it into perspective. But it's a very small scale range, that HRC range that we deal with in our knives, and our folding knives and our pocket knives. It only really affects us from the HRC 60 up to the HRC 70. And it's a big difference in the characteristics of that steel when you use it and you cut with it and you sharpen it between the 56 hardness and say the 64 or 65 hardness. It's day to night difference. It's day to night difference how it feels when you sharpen it, and it's day to night difference how it feels when you use it. Thanks.